ETV Media has sought to clarify before the Gauteng High Court in Pretoria that it does not seek to obstruct digital migration. This as ETV, together with Media Monitoring Africa and SOS Support Public Broadcasting Coalition, have turned to the court to invalidate and halt the analogue switch-off set for the end of this month. The applicants argue that if the decision to set the switch-off deadline to the 31st of March this year is not reviewed and set aside, it will sever millions of South Africans from access to television. Advocate Marcus Gilbert SC, on behalf of ETV, argued that the applicants support migration as long as it follows a lawful process. SABC News reporter Canny Maphanga is at the court and she joins us live. Thank you very much, Canny, for your time. So just give us a bit more flavour of what transpired this morning.
Indeed, good afternoon to you, Nambu, and to the viewers. We have seen the applicants charge that they're fully in support of this successful migration process. However, they are charging that we're not there yet, as government has failed to meet the demands and constitutional requirements in order for them to give effect to that deadline. We're seeing this application, this is a special allocation in the urgent court, where they are asking for the deadline or the decision to make the deadline for the analogue switch off to the 31st of March 2025 to be reviewed and set aside. We're hearing numerous arguments that point a grim picture of the state's role in this project. We're looking at quite large figures that would see on the 1st of April, if it is allowed to continue, a number of households, that is at least over 1 million, that will not have access to information, or that right to access to information will be impeded on if they are not allowed to proceed, rather, with that deadline date. Now, we have seen there are public interest organizations that are here to argue that the state is not ready yet to give effect to this analogue switch off. We know that from the Constitutional Court ruling that it was critical for that consultative process for it to be rational, to include key stakeholders, that is Media Monitoring Africa as well as SOS. Now, we've heard from the arguments before the court this morning that neither were consulted, and on that basis alone, it makes the decision irrational and therefore not meeting the requirements of a lawful process. To elaborate further on this argument, I am joined by SOS's Ms. Uyanda, who has been following this issue as far back as we can imagine. We know the deadlines span back to 2011. Essentially, what SOS is saying that this decision was taken without the key stakeholders that the Constitutional Court at least identified, without their consultation, in order to assist the state in achieving a lawful process and achieving the objects of a successful migration.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think as SOS and MMA, the reason why it was important even for the Constitutional Court to recognize that we needed to be, consulted is because, there is an understanding that we do represent the public interest, in these engagements, because you've got broadcasters that were consulted, but organizations like ourselves, we're not consulted. And this is a matter that affects millions and millions of people. But I think, one particular thing about this particular court case is that, our lawyers were really able to point out, to the court that it was important for us to be consulted, in accordance with the Constitutional Court ruling. But I think the other important thing is that they actually really pointed out the fact that rights of, many poor and marginalized people are going to be infringed should this, analogue switch off go ahead, as planned on the 31st of March.
We've been given a teaser that government is going to state that this process can be finished by December, but the applicants are not convinced that in 9 months or so that you would be able to meet the demands of at least the qualifying households and be able to install those set-top boxes.
It's impossible. It's impossible. I think the numbers that were presented here today by ourselves and ETV really show that it is impossible that government would actually complete this process in such a short period of time. When in the last 18 months they've only been able to install 61,000 set-top boxes, and now we've got 447 households that still need these installations, and there's absolutely no way that by the end of this year that installation process would have been completed.
Let's say your relief is granted and the decision is remitted back to the minister. How do you come up with a process now that reaches a deadline that is sufficient for all parties involved, and we don't get this recurring issue of constant extensions on the analog switch-off, which we've been expecting to happen since 2011.
I think the onus really is on the minister to consult broadly. So, because I think the one issue that led us here is because there wasn't consultation. Because even with broadcasters, people would have wanted a much longer period, or a much longer postponement that would allow government to meet the conditions and the demands of the broadcasters, which in fact have also not been met. So I think the onus is on the minister, because we have tried as SOS and MMA to write multiple times to the minister to try and engage him on these issues, but we have been unsuccessful. So hopefully, if a ruling really, sets this analog switch-off aside, there will be willingness from the minister's side to engage, but we will just keep pushing, and trying to get them to, engage with us and, the broader impacted parties.
Well, thank you very much. That was Ms. Oyanda of SOS. It seems, Nompu, that all parties are in agreement with achieving the successful migration process. The issue at contention here is making sure that it is a constitutional process that takes into consideration the number of members of the public that need that right to access to information, and of course the survival and the sustainability of the broadcasters that utilize this ordinance to generate revenue and ensure that they are sustainable. Now, we were expecting that after the lunch adjournment that the Ministers' Council would be responding to some of the allegations that have been tabled before the court this morning. But of course there is an issue with the kind of figures that have been presented with respect to Centec, which you can describe as the implementing agent for those set-top boxes. So of course they've asked for time to consult and then file an additional affidavit, which they'll present tomorrow morning. And of course, what will follow is those replies from the applicants in this all-important case. Over to you in studio.
All right. Thank you so much for that report, my colleague there, Canny Maphanga.